Um, so I want to thank Alvin for inviting us and Skyline College for creating this platform for us to be able to share our thoughts around Pinayism. I also want to thank Roger. He's here in this room somewhere helping us out to make sure that, like you all can hear us. If there are any issues, make sure you drop the issues over to the Q&A. We're going to begin by acknowledging the land that we're on. For most of us on the live chat call, we are on Ohlone land, and the Ohlone people are still here. I like to really focus when giving the land acknowledgement that there is knowledge that they have contributed to the ways in which we live. And they are continuing to sustain the land, and this land belongs to them. So I want to acknowledge the Ohlone people and the land that we're doing this workshop on. I know that many of you are from different lands, and I want you to also acknowledge the indigenous people of the lands in which you stand. I'd also like to do an ancestor acknowledgement. Many of us are in this discovery mode of our ancestors. Really important is to acknowledge the people that we want to take on our journey. So before we continue with our actual workshop, I would love if the people on our chat would put in their name, put in what land that they are living on, and then also put in an ancestor that they would like to take on our journey, this Pinayism journey. So I'll just kind of name them as we go. We have Monica in this room, and she would like to bring in her mother's mother, Magdalena. In our public room, we got Lorna Velasco coming us from the coast, Salish, Melissa Navera Lozano, and she would like to bring in her sister, Filipina Jasmine Pinay. We have Leonard Garcia bringing her grandmother, Lilia, Valerie Fernandez, bringing in her grandmothers, Guadalupe and Maria. We have Hillary in our room here, and she'd like to bring in her cousin, her Ate Michelle. Celeste would like to bring in her Lola, Lucille. Carla would like to bring in one of her teachers, Miss Palapil. Lauren would like to bring in her Nana, Juanita. Amian would like to bring in her Kampampangan grandmother, Honorata. Janelle would like to bring in her grandmother, Remedios. And I'm sure that we're going to have many, many more. So as we're going on with our presentation, please feel free to go ahead and drop in more names and whatever you'd like to share as we go. We want to make this as interactive as possible. I know it's challenging because, our room is limited, and then, some of you are on the other side of the wall, it feels like, but let's try to blur that wall as we go. So I want to say that Pinayism really, for me, started with sisterhood and started with poetry. And so we're going to begin this by actually going in, and Giselle and I are going to read a poem that is 19 years old. And we're hoping that it still resonates with you. And actually, sadly, some of it still resonates. And so we're going to go ahead and read this poem called Pinay Screamed. So Giselle will be flashing onto the screen the actual, I call them lyrics or poetry of this poem so you can follow along. So the poem is called She Screamed But No One Heard. She screamed as the lost daughters of the Luzon Indios who came on a Spanish galleon in 1587. She screamed as the missing child of the Filipinos who jumped ship in 1763. She screamed in 1904 when they put her in a box to be shipped to St. Louis to parade in a fair like an exotic animal in a cage. She screamed in the 20s and 30s, left back in the Philippines as her sons and brothers left to labor in the States. She screamed as only 7 to 10% of the Filipinos who came to the US in the 1930s. She screamed as a beauty queen under surveillance deemed social box dancer, also working in the fields at home and for her community. She screamed as a war bride and wife of men in the military. She screamed as part of the military who sacrifices her mind and her body to the war. She screamed as a prostitute whose body was rest and recreation for men at Clark and Subic Bay. She screamed as an educated and professional woman whose pay is still lower than men. She screamed with dreams to be successful only to be sent to a brothel. She screamed in rage. She screamed at every age. She screamed when he hit her. She screamed, but no one heard.
She screamed at the computer lab as she scanned her college photo and sent it to a man she met through an agency. 6 months later, she boards a plane with just a bag of dreams, memories of her family. 16 hours passed, and she exits the runway into the arms of a man who mail-ordered her companionship, her skills, and her body. She was his personal slave, who scrubbed the scum of his existence and her body cleaned the dirt of his desire. He didn't love her, nor did she love him. Unsure of her future, she still expected to live a happy life, but one night, she fell ill and was unable to perform the duties he demanded. He performed violent acts, hot iron to her face, then slammed her head against the wood of the bed. Over and over, she screamed, but no one heard, and her fate ended in tragedy, because at 21, she married a stranger who calls himself a man and American, whose hand was placed at the face of her death.
She screamed. The morning of the first day of 10th grade, Lola made her favorite breakfast, day-old rice, sliced spam topped with perfectly fried eggs with crispy edges. And for dessert, she had toast smeared with butter and sprinkled with sugar. Lola demanded, "Kain na," or in your dad's language, "Mangang tayon." From the bathroom, she screamed in English, "No more," slammed the door. She stood profile in front of a full-length mirror, looking up and down at her body with distorted perspective, wishing that the spamsilog didn't sound so damn good, wishing that the baby girl in her womb would just go away before Lola found out, wishing that the boy that told her everything was going to be okay would just call. She screamed, but no one heard. Self-hung with a shower curtain choked around her thin neck. 15 years later, in the same bathroom, her body was found by her firstborn child.
She screamed in the state of war, 2020. 2020 bodies every day shipped as cattle, as meat, as product, as labor, as sex. She screamed that in this state of war, in the fear that all would be left would be body bags, a rewritten policy, and a white president. She screamed that the war would take more than just life. It would take a generation. It would take her sister's body, her mom's hard work, her father's nationalism, her grandparents' sacrifices. It would take her memories, and quickly, it would take her.
She screamed these stories to people, to Filipinos across the world. Her words fell silent on deaf ears. They only heard echoes of screaming spirits, but they never listened to their roles in the stories, till the story was about their families, about their friends, and about them. She screamed, but no one heard. So what do y'all think in this room of that piece? It's like 19 years ago, but so many of the same things kind of show up in the ways in which we currently are living as Pinays. That's the unfortunate side of things. We're going to transition from this poem because I know there was a lot going on in the poem and a lot of ideas. I do want to say that the poem is based on real her story, actual evidence stories. So everything here was based on news clippings. It was based on the research of one of my closest and best friends, Dr. Dawn Bohulano Mabalon, is one of the ancestors that I like to bring into our work. A lot of what we wrote here, a lot of what I wrote here was based specifically on her work and evidenced research on the things that were happening to Pinays. So to kind of like think about what these things are, we're gonna delve a little bit into some interactive work together here. So if you see that there's this tiny URL here, it should give you all access to a document, a Google Doc. And what we'd like you to do, and we're gonna give you like a song's worth of time, a Pinay song's worth of time, to actually type in Pinay issues that you think are some of the biggest issues that Pinays are facing right now. And we're gonna try to talk through some of those together. So if you type in tinyurl /Pinay issues, you should be able to open up a document and all of you should have access to it. And I'd like you to type into that document some Pinay issues that you feel maybe you heard in the poem, or maybe you feel like you're experiencing, or that you've seen Pinays experiencing, and especially if it has to do with the current pandemic. Okay, so we're gonna give you a song's worth of time to do that. And I have actually in it at the end, if you stay all the way to the end of this workshop, I'm going to give you a little gift because I'm going to give you this Pinay playlist. A lot of you know Ruby Ibarra, and definitely we're going to play Ruby Ibarra during this time of this workshop. But I want to play this one Pinay who I think is an up and coming Pinay rapper. And for some reason, this song resonates with me, and it's also close enough to Mother's Day to play it. So I'm going to play this song, and during this song, I want you to go to that Google Doc, and I want you to fill out what you think are some global, local, and personal issues of Pinays. Okay. Y'all like that song? It's scary, huh? Don't mess with your mom. Don't fuck with her mom. I love that. That's Versol, everybody. She from the Bay, and I'm a secret fan. Just know, but I absolutely love what she's doing with music and making the statements that she's making. To me, that's Pinayism. You'll notice that I will be cheerleading for Pinays like for this whole time and the rest of my life, and so I'm always trying to highlight Pinays. Even as we do the pedagogy of this, the music, the words, the citations, all of them are Pinays. Okay, oh, this is so, I'm looking at the Google Doc. Yo, this is technology right here. There are like, I think there are like almost 60 of you typing into this document. There's 31 that are showing up here, but there's a lot of people. And so I actually want to do a little bit of analysis on this, and I'm gonna ask my team of live folks here to take a look at this list, and I am gonna ask you what you're thinking. Where do you see the connections? And we're gonna start off with global. I think important to start off with global because we are literally in a pandemic, and that is a global thing. But there have been things that have been global that have been impacting Pinays way before this pandemic. And so it's not just because we're experiencing this crisis right now that we've been experiencing crisis. We've been experiencing it for quite some time. So I'm gonna open it up to the group here. And I'm gonna see who's, anybody here want to talk a little bit about what you see in the global list. What are some of the things that you see? Okay, I'm gonna start with Hillary because she's top of my box here. What are some of the things, Hillary, that you're seeing in this global list?
I'm seeing that a lot of this is due to centuries of colonization of the Philippines. All of these definitely have their ramifications on just the body of the Pinay and are interconnected with the personal.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the thing, right? Like some of them are crossing those borders of global, local, personal. I appreciate that. Like, so colonialism is a huge thing. Colonization and its results on the colonization of our people, right? So that shows up. What else? What else are we seeing that the structural things that have impacted the ways in which Pinays experience their lives globally? Carla, do you have any feedback for that?
Yeah, one thing that I was kind of looking at was the respectability politics. And like that's, I guess like the phrasing never came to me, but putting it like that, like I see that connected to the personal as well, like anxiety and like, you know, like the guilt that comes with it.
Can you talk a little bit more about respectability politics? This is gonna get good. I can feel it.
I don't know
Are
if
you
this is
talking,
correct, but
sorry, Carla, are you talking about the global list or the personal list?
the globalist.
Okay, cool.
I guess like from my understanding, like you have to do certain things to be respected. Like it's not something that comes to you. I mean, you should have it, but it's like these politics, like they give markers for what you should be doing.
Are you talking about labor?
I think more generally, but I don't know whoever wrote that, what they might be thinking.
Yeah, that's actually on the list. I'm wondering how respectability politics also has to do with the ways in which we understand global labor. I think there's some really interesting dynamics there. I think that many of us get very upset when people assume that Pinays are prostitutes or that we are mail order brides. There's this, for some of us, we have this immediate reaction to that, get very, very upset very quickly. A lot of that has to do with the assumption. But Pinays, people actually are experiencing this type of labor. And so I think that that has something a little bit to do with, not a little bit, some to do with respectability politics, that like to be respectable, you need to work in certain areas and certain fields. And I think that that can be problematic in some of our discussion on the global level. And oftentimes we don't think about what people can and cannot do, or what people are forced to do. And we dehumanize often our own sisters in thinking about what they experience in their labor. And so that's how I kind of connecting all the dots for the respectability politics. But that was really helpful. Thank you, Carla. Giselle will later on go deeper into the global politics of Pinayism. So what about local? Anybody see any connections in the local? Monica, what are you thinking about this local list here?
I'm actually still reading it. So I'm looking through the list. And to me, what I'm seeing, at least at the beginning of the list, is that a lot of, actually, yeah, okay. So at the beginning of the list, I'm kind of seeing a lack of resources, whether that's, financial resources or even just like wellness resources, community resources. So just this feeling of like not having enough when it comes to Pinayis locally. And then as I go down the list and I'm like hitting the stuff that says like staying colonized is easier, burnout, isolation, disconnect, finding community or sense of belonging, erasure from history. The things that I'm just coming to mind is like when we're considering Pinayis in the local context, it's like, one, we're like fighting just for our resources, but two, we don't seem to have a connection to our identities as Pinayis, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that that's showing up a lot on the local. It's like almost like these lines are blurry between local and personal. I mean, even just talking about identity and identity politics, what we didn't get to touch on the global, and I see it's kind of sticking out to me, is this real need to think about identity as being a lot more than what people expect of us. So de-essentializing identity. And at some point there was the queer experience showed up on the global. I don't know where it went, but I think it moved over to now the personal. And so I think it's really important to know that like a lot of these issues are going across. But in terms of identity politics, even just some of the things that we are grappling with now, what to call ourselves, Pinay, Pinex, all of these discussions are happening right now. And some of them are really hot, like people are like having some really good dialogue about it. But I noticed here one thing, there it is, the murders of queer and trans bodies, like, and how that shows up on the global level, but it's also showing up in the local, and then definitely showing up in the personal experiences. I'm hoping today that we really delve deeper into the discussion around how Pinayism can be queered and how it can be really thought through in terms of not just talking about Pinayis who are cis and straight or however people describe themselves, but also looking deeper about how our community is more diverse than that. And so let's go to this personalist. Thank you, Mon. Let's go to this personalist, Amian. Did I say the name right?
It's Amian, but Amihan is the Tagalog version of it.
Amian, I want to say it correctly. One more time.
Amian, yes.
Amian, can you help us navigate this personal list? What do you see on this personal list and what sticks out to you?
I think what's really interesting is how the personal issues reflect the global issues. Like, for example, the mothering but unprocessed trauma, role reversals, debt of obligation to family, transactional relationships, mental health. All of these sort of are the result of colonization, but also the capitalist exploitation of labor. Like family separation and that distance causes a lot of strain on family dynamics, and it ends up like sort of reproducing those type of toxic dynamics. And I think a lot of us can relate to sort of that feeling of being obligated to your family and having to take up roles like parenting roles when you are either immigrating to a different country and trying to assimilate. And when you're used to being in a multi-generational household, when there's, uncles and aunts and all these people who are taking care of children and sharing the labor in the house, and then having to, as a like 1.5 generation immigrant Like there's this big shift in the roles I have to take on when having to immigrate here in the US.
Yeah, that's key. And I love how you connected it back. So just so we're clear, like I think that some people describe it as colonization. Some people would describe it as imperialism. Definitely the connection to capitalism and how that impacts the ways in which our bodies are moving from country to country, and how our, you know, like, and what that means in terms of like where we're accepted and where we are not accepted. And so those pieces are really important, how that plays out in this discussion. So this long list, and I really appreciate all of you who contributed to the list. It is really robust. And I'm hoping that we can hit on some of these issues. And I'm hoping that this list that you all get to have and keep, you all begin to think about what is your role in this list. I think at times when we're Pinay, we look at this list and we are the victims of this list. But I also think that we need to think about what are the ways in which we enable this list and the kind of practices that we do. And so that becomes really important to think about, not just like I am victim, but then also what are the things that I do that then perpetuate some of these things on this list or contribute to it. And we'll try to uncover some of those ideas as we go. So I'm going to hand off now to my colleague, Dr. Sacramento. And she is actually going to take us through a little bit more searching and then talking about the global, local, personal deeper.
Thanks, Ate Allison. So right now, I would like everyone to take out their phone or their laptop and do a search. You could do it on Google, you could do it on any other search engine, but Google the word or search for the word Filipina. And I'd like you to take a look at what you find. And once you have looked through the first couple of pages of that search, what do you see? You can fill it up in the chat or you can raise your hand. Kaylin, did I see your hand raised?
Oh yeah, sure. So the definition says a Filipino girl or woman, but as I keep scrolling down, I feel like they're focusing more on our physical features and how we're like known for our beauty more than like.
Thank you. Yeah, so a lot of the results are showing that Filipinas are known for their beauty, right? What else are we finding? And on the chat, Celeste, what are you finding?
Something that stood out to me was a glimpse into the life of Douglas MacArthur, Filipina's mistress. So going off of what Kaylin said about like focusing on the Pinay body.
So there's a lot of focus on the Pinay body. Elaine in the chat said that the first searches that she saw, definitions, also results showing dating Filipina girls, a lot focusing on appearance. What else are we seeing? Janelle, what do you see?
Focusing on like dating Pinay and images of white men next to a Pinay. And so in many ways, like the property of Pinays in relation to white men, right? And like how they should be serving them, which is very reflective of colonial ideals and a capitalist mindset.
Thank you, Janelle. So I really appreciate that connection of connecting these images to the ways in which Pinay bodies have been commodified and also portrayed. And this is very much in line with some of the ways that Pinays are perceived on the global level. And so I'm gonna take us through a journey of looking at the global, local, and personal issues of Pinays. And I want you to keep these images and these results in your mind of how Pinays are perceived. I'm gonna start off by showing a clip. This is Vilma Santos in the film Anak. And so in this clip, Vilma Santos her character is an overseas contract worker, and she is just returning to the Philippines, and this is an interaction that she is having with her daughter.
Sana hindi na lang ako naging ina mo. Sana hindi rin kita naging anak. Ngayon, kung iniisip mo hindi mo ako pinili bilang ina mo, sana maisip mo rin na hindi itong buhay na pinili ko para sa inyo mga anak ko. Kung iniisip mo na sana binalik kita sa tiyan ko, sana maisip mo rin na ilang beses kong ginusto na hindi na kayo pinanganak para hindi nyo maranasan ang hirap dito sa mundo. Pero nandito na ako. Nandiyan kayo. Kahit nandito na ako sa manlupalop ng mundo, dito dala-dala ko. Ang obligasyon ko sa inyo na bigyan kayo ng magandang buhay dahil magulang niyo ako.
Hindi mo ako naiintindihan. Hindi ko hiningi lahat ng binigay niyo sa amin. Kayo may gusto na hindi ako.
Dahil mahal ko kayo. Mahal ko kayo. Ngayon, sabihin mo sa akin, sinasabi mong hindi kita naiintindihan? Bakit, Carla? Ako ba inintindi mo kahit minsan? Hindi. Sarili mo lang iniintindi mo. Sana kahit minsan, binigyan mo na halaga lahat ng paghihirap ko sa inyo, lahat ng sakripisyo ko sa inyo. Sana, tuwing umiinom ka ng alak, habang iniitip mo ang sigarilyo mo, habang nilulustay mo yung mga perang pinadala ko, sana maisip mo rin kung ilang pagkain na tiniis kong hindi kainin para lang makapagpadala ko ng malaking pera dito. Sana, habang nakahiga ka dyan sa kutsyon mo, natutulog, maisip mo rin kung ilang taong kong tiniis ang matulog mag-isa habang nangungulila ako sa yakap ng mga mahal ko. Sana maisip mo kahit konti kung gaano kasakit sa akin na mag-alaga ng mga batang hindi ko kaano-ano. Samantalang kayo mga anak ko, hindi ko man lang kayo maalagaan. Alam mo ba kung gaano kasakit yun sa isang ina? Alam mo ba kung gaano kasakit yun? Kung hindi mo ko kayang ituring bilang isang ina, respetuhin mo na lang ako bilang isang tao. Yun lang, Carla. Yun man lang.
When we watch this video, when we watch this interaction between Vilma's character and her daughter, how does it make you feel? Lauren, can you describe how you were feeling through that process?
Dang, I don't know what it is with Tagalog movies, but every time I watch stuff like this, I always want to cry with them. But I appreciated this clip because I think, like we see like this tension between a mom and her daughter, and we see how the mom feels, and she's like really expressing it. But I think what's missing is like the context of what the daughter, has been making her mom feel. And so even though like her mom is listing like, like when you drink your beer, when you smoke, when I'm laying in bed all alone, I kind of want to learn more about and even like watch this movie to see like how the daughter interacts with her mom so that we can understand better how their relationship is. But to me, it feels like, like they have like this misunderstanding and they're in this process of trying to voice how they feel so that they can better understand each other.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, there's definitely a misunderstanding of what their experiences are. And when we're thinking about global issues, I think we have to remember what Hillary said in that all of these issues are interconnected, right? The global issues of Filipinas and their labor on a global scale will impact how their relationships are with their families, with their children. And so I want to use this video to kind of set that tone of, I'm going to be talking about global issues, but I want us to remember that these are also impacting how we interact with others and also how we see ourselves. So on a global level, Filipinas, out of the 750,000 overseas contract workers exported from the Philippines in 2005, Filipinas were actually 70% of those women who were exported, or the people who were exported, right? Of that 70%, 2/3 are in domestic labor, right? And domestic labor includes those who are nannies, who are nurses, who are caretakers. About 1/3 are in the sex trade, whether it's prostitution, or whether it's rest and recreation for men. This is the global look of how Filipinas are working in the world. And all of these are examples of reproductive labor. Reproductive labor is a labor needed to sustain the productive labor force, which includes the daily physical and ideological maintenance of human beings, right? So Filipinas are being sent all over the world, right? So we see Filipinas everywhere. I know when we travel, sometimes we might see Filipinas in these different roles. And part of that is because that it's a big part of the Philippine economy. 10% of the Philippine population are actually exported out of the Philippines to work in different parts of the world, taking care of different people, different families and different families that are not their own. And that was the case for Vilma Santos's character in Anak. She was sent abroad to work, to send remittances back to her family so that her family could survive in the Philippines. And that's a big part of the Philippine economy. And I want to shed light on poet Irene Dullier. In one of her poems, she says, "They call me the maid of the world, and the world has made me dirty." And so when we're seeing Filipinas all over the world being placed in these reproductive labor roles, oftentimes the perception that is formed, process is one image that is dirty or valued, right? I'm going to bring it back to Carla's comment on respectability politics, that when we think about the Filipinas in the global world and how their bodies have been used for the labor that they're doing, it creates this image. And then that image then informs how the world perceives us, right? And how we might perceive ourselves. And then when we take a look at the local level in the United States, we have to think about what Filipinas have looked like in the US. And I just want to take note of all the comments that are coming in. Thank you for participating. I know some of you have participated in the Google search, and I just wanted to acknowledge Valerie, who said she saw dating site. There are explanations in Urban Dictionary on what Filipina means, that there's a definition that says Filipinos are a good race to mix with other races to make beautiful, pretty kids. And these are some of the reasons why some of the systems like mail-order bride systems exist within the global level, and how Filipino women's bodies have been exported or mail ordered. When we're looking, and I'm going to bring it back to the US, when we're looking at the United States, Filipinas have been here for quite some time. And before 1910, the census never recorded how many Filipinas have been in the US, but Filipinas have been here. In 1920, we know that there were 190 Pinays in the US. And it's grown, right? It's grown all the way up to over a million Pinays. And we're doing a census right now, 2020 census, so don't forget to include your information in the US Census so that we can be counted. Additionally, in the US, Filipinas are being affected by this pandemic, right? A big reason why Filipinas migrated to the US was that there was a recruitment for nurses. The US needed nurses to work in our hospitals. In the US in particular, 4% of nurses are Filipina, right? In California alone, 1/5 or 20% of the nurses in California are Filipina. And so when we're thinking about a time when we have this pandemic, COVID-19, and like who are really the essential workers that are working on the front lines? Many of them are Filipina, right? And Filipino, right? And so Filipinas are continuing to take care of the world throughout this pandemic. I want to take note of some of these chat responses. Monica said that something that comes up for me is how money seems essential to caring for families. Money is more important than being there with your families. That is a narrative that seems to be pushed. Amian says capitalism reduces our relationships to transactions, coerces us into these dynamics. So that really explains what was happening in the film, Anak. And then Monica says, yes, it basically dismantles what it means for us to care for each other. So thank you for all those comments. That's definitely what's happening on the global, local levels for Filipinas. And other issues that are happening, there's a rise of domestic violence. Domestic violence is also an issue that Pinays face on a local level, in addition to AIDS, unplanned pregnancies, suicidality, depression, risky behavior, and microaggressions. And so these perceptions on the global level can oftentimes impact how we internalize these ideas, but they become issues on a local level because it's happening to so many Pinays, right? There have been studies in San Diego where Pinays were the highest Asian with suicidal thoughts or ideation and suicidal attempts. So mental health has been a big issue, not only on the personal level, but also locally. And then on the personal level, there are all of these different ways that Filipinas have internalized these ideas, right? And I do want to shed light that even though these issues exist, there is still hope, right? And that's what we're trying to bring today is Pinayism. And this quote that's on the screen is from a Pinay high school student who was part of a Pinayism workshop back in, I believe, 2009. And she says, the Pinayism workshop challenged me to love myself, to see beyond my internalized perceptions of what the world thinks of me. It also made me think about how I treat other Pinays. So when we're thinking about Pinays on the global, local, and personal levels, we also have to think about, well, what can we do about it, right? And so we are going to, I'm going to pass the mic on to myself because I still have a couple slides left. And so let me connect all of this, right? So how does this all connect? Bringing it back to what Hillary said earlier, it's all interconnected. And I wanted to relate it to the 3 shifts of labor, right? So the first shift of labor is our productive labor, right? Wage labor, income generating. So productive labor is like what you get paid for, what paying your salary, what is paying your wage, right? That's what we do, we get paid. The second shift, oftentimes, which is reproductive labor, is the work that you do when you go home. It's the maintenance of home and family. When you're done with work, it's about mothering, like taking care of your kids, cooking, cleaning, do the laundry. That's that second shift, right? And oftentimes that second shift has historically been placed on women within heteropatriarchal relationships. And then there's a third shift. It's the reproductive labor that we see in not only our workplace and community, but the emotional maintenance that we do in different spaces, right? And today we're adding the fourth shift, which is the critical cultural production. Like, what do we do in terms of our producing different culture production, activism, social change? What do we do outside all of the other roles that we have in our life, right? And oftentimes, Pinays have on multiple shifts within their life, right? They take on all of these different roles. And so when you think about Pinay's experience on the global, local, and personal, to also how they're navigating their everyday life, it's a lot of work, right? Just reading this list right now is making me tired. And so what do we need to do for ourselves and for our communities in order to sustain ourselves and to survive and thrive in this type of world? And so I'm gonna pass it on to Allison.
Thank you for the mic. So before we go forward in talking about Pinayism, I'm going to take a pause. We're going to take a one song pause again. And this time I'd like you to write, you could write in the Google Doc or you can write in your journal. And I want you to think about the question that Giselle left us with. What do we need to do? Now that we've heard all these global, local, and personal issues, what do we need to do? So there's a couple ways you can share that with us. You can share it on the Google Doc, you can share it in the Q&A, and if you're in this special Zoom room here, you can actually put it in the chat. But I'm gonna give you a song's worth of time, because there's a lot of information, and I think it's good to pause. This is the Pinayism pause, not menopause. Oh yeah, Pinayism pause. I am experiencing menopause. It's totally fine. It's a natural thing. So we're gonna pause, and we are going to take a song to actually think about what do we need to do to respond to these things? What do we need to do to address some of these things? Much of what Giselle talked about can trigger things. It can really make us feel like we're under an even more deeper crisis than just the pandemic. And so I just want to give us a time to pause. And so we're gonna get one song. By the way, there's some people who asked me about the first song. The first song was Versol, and the song is called "Don't Fuck With My Mom." I'm gonna play another song for us, and it's another Pinay who I think a lot of people don't really know. But I'm gonna play this song. Her name is Charmaine Clamore, My Funny Brown Pinay. Y'all like that song? That was cool, right? Okay, so this list right here is growing. I love it. I think I'm going to read a couple things here, and then we're going to move on to talk about how we employ a lot of these things in Pinayism. So one of the things, the very first thing it says up there is constantly check on ourselves before we wreck ourselves. Someone in the 80s or 90s wrote that part, before we wreck ourselves. Reflect on the ways we reproduce capitalist power dynamics in our interpersonal relationships, for real about that. What are the contradictions that arise with our relationships with our families in particular, and how do we resolve them? So I want to point out that we're not going to, on this call, we're not going to be able to provide concrete solutions. And sometimes it's just a matter of talking about stuff, you know, like, and really allowing space to talk about these things. Not that we'll never get to solutions, but especially around our family dynamics, that's something that you've got to process over time. And so we're not going to be able to give you an equation or anything that will just fix everything. A couple other things that I see on here, harm is inevitable and in this oppressive society. So what do we do now? Like, what are some of the restorative practices or restorative justice practices that we can utilize to mend broken relationships? Oh, it's scrolling for me. Thank you, just it's okay. I just want to kind of point at the word restorative. I think it's really important to think about before restorative justice, the movement, we were already trying to restore ourselves. But restoring ourselves doesn't always mean going back to what it was, but then sometimes it also means restoring us back to before what it was. Like, so some indigenous practices that I think are really important to consider. And I think sometimes we think of restorative as being a place of comfort, but I think what's key is to think about how can we mend. I really like the word mend in this particular point. Connect with other Pinayis and share our burdens and our joys. So I'm gonna pause there and I'm gonna transition back to really understanding what that means. Connect with our Pinayis and talk about our joys and our pains, right? So as I look at this and I'm getting kind of emotional. This picture is really deep. This is a picture of Dr. Don Bohulano's wedding to Jessie Gonzalez. And you can see we were all in the wedding in different capacities. Some of us were ninangs and some of us were maid of honors. The four of us here, it's Dr. Don Bohulano Mabalan, me, Joan May Cordova, and Emily Lawson. And we were very much the beginnings of Pinayism. And so I want to be mindful that when I talk about Pinayism, and oftentimes I get attributed to coining the concept Pinayism, even though that was a word that came out of my mouth, I felt Pinayism with these people. And these people were the first Pinay Power panel at any conference. So this was the first Pinay panel. And one person who's missing in this picture is Darlene Rodriguez from Hawaii. And we were the first Pinay panel at the Asian American Studies Conference. We were the first Pinay panel at the FONS conference. And that really kind of means a lot to me to share that with all of you, because we're talking about almost 30 years ago. And sadly, we're not all alive in this picture, but we all feel alive in this picture. And so I really appreciate these Pinayis who built Pinayism with me. So there's this quote here from Elsa Valderrama. It's called Overseas Female Workers, and this is kind of our transition. I'm not allowed to be a woman. I'm not allowed to be a mother, where the world requires me to leave my children to work elsewhere across the ocean from them, where money is made, but not for a better life. And so I really want to make sure that I'm always connecting back to the sisters that I have across the sea who may not have the privileges to even sit on a Zoom call to talk about this stuff. And to also really think about like the ways in which this notion of not being allowed to be a woman or not being allowed to be a mother, and how key that is to understanding the ways in which we understand what it means to be Pinay. And I also want to point, even though like I love this piece, I want to really be clear and be upfront with my views on this, that to be a woman does not mean that you have to have birthed a child. That's very important. And then I also want to say, to be a mother, you don't have to have birthed a child. For me, I feel like these three women in this picture that I'm standing next to have mothered me. They have truly mothered me, whether or not they had children of their own. And so that's really kind of like the baseline for me, is to like think about what it means to be Pinay, means to also be a woman or identified as a woman. Like, what do those things mean? And it's really putting into question all of those things. So Pinayism really starts with, Jasil put all these beautiful books up here, and we really came out from the womanist movement. The womanist movement really pushed up against the feminist movement. I think sometimes every time I talk about feminism with a bunch of women of color, there's a lot of pain in our stomach, in our womb, because we often feel like feminism is associated with white womanness, and it doesn't always reflect the experiences that we have as women of color or as Pinays or Pinexes, right? So it's really key to really think about what is feminism in its relationship to womanism and its relationship to Pinayism. Alice Walker had this metaphor in her poem, and some of you might be familiar with the womanist poem that she wrote. She said that feminism is to womanism as lavender is to purple. And I always loved that quote, because I felt like, you know, even though like I can't buy into everything that feminism has put out over the generations, I still am connected to them as women. And I felt like feminism was not enough for us to be centered. We were always on the margins. Pinays were always on the margins, off margins of feminism, and even at times margins of womanism. And so I felt the need to really work with the Pinays in my life to develop this thing called Pinayism. And so I'm gonna kind of go a little bit into what that is, and then we'll spend some time talking about it, and maybe hearing some poetry about it. It's a magical 111 right now. That some of you might know, this is my favorite number, is 11, and like, you know, it's very spiritual. And so I'm gonna make sure that we try to stay on our time and end by 2 p.m. today. So Cherie Moraga and Gloria Ansaldúa, some of the two major womanist theorists, women of color theorists who impacted my life, wrote this, and I live by this. This is what I believe is really the beginning points of Pinayism. We are the colored in the white feminist movement. We are the feminists among people of our culture. We are the lesbians among the straight. We do this bridging by naming ourselves and telling our stories in our own words. So key for me is this particular phrase, and this is something I've been doing since the very beginning of Pinayism, is talking about Cherie Moraga and Gloria Ansaldúa. This notion of naming ourselves is centering ourselves. It's a centering and grounding of ourselves. So when I created the notion of Pinayism, it was like jokey, you know, with some friends, and it was like, wait a second, you know, we actually need to take and you know, make stake in our ground and say, actually, you know what? No, we're going to name ourselves, because we are always on the margins of everything. So a little bit of her story. The first time that Pinayism was used was in this magazine that I wasn't the editor in 1995, but I was one of the original editors of Maganda magazine back in the day. And they had asked me, I was in graduate school at UCLA getting my PhD, and they asked me to write an article on Pinay or Filipina feminism, is the way that they described it. And so I wanted to do anything but write my dissertation. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this thing on Filipina feminism. And the funny thing about it is I actually didn't know what that was. Like, I just kind of thought, oh, you know, it's feminists who are Filipina, you know, like, and that's kind of how I approached it. And I thought, I immediately thought of, you know, the feminists in the Philippines who were fighting, you know, like for all kinds of rights for, you know, for Filipinas in the Philippines and across the world, particularly focusing on labor. And so that's where it started. But then I was like, you know, I want to know about like the Pinays, right? I want to know what, you know, like Pinays are experiencing, especially the youth, like what are they saying? So when Lauren was talking about the movie Anak, and she was saying, oh, you know, what about, you know, like the daughter? Those were the voices that I really wanted to hear. Like, what about the daughters, right? And so some of you might know this story. I'm gonna make it hella quick because, you know, like I don't wanna go too much later. But I started this whole Pinayism thing in the mall. Y'all know the mall? I missed the fucking mall. I'm sorry, I missed the mall. Sorry to all my nieces who are watching that I said the F word. I think I might have said the F word already. But anyways, so I miss them all. This study started in the mall, and this place called New Park Mall. Y'all know New Park? Some of you from the East Bay are like, yeah, I used to hang out there before it got kind of, you know? So yeah, Celeste was saying, New Park Mall. Okay, so I started this study at New Park Mall. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to find out what the Pinays feel and think about being Pinay. And I'm going to create something out of that. I'm like, they're going to tell me, you know, like, and I was really into this thing on grounded theory at the time when I was writing my dissertation. So I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this thing out. And so I go to the mall. I'm in the mall. And well, not quite in the mall yet. I'm in the parking lot. And I was one of those Pinays. I drove a Jeep, you know, like, it was hella bumping. And I turned off my car and I started walking up to the mall. And I see this group of Filipino youth. And I was like, oh, okay. There's some Pinays there and there's some dudes there too, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna go talk to them because they're gonna have all my answers. I don't even have to go inside the mall. And I was like, wow, that is so cool because I can do my whole study without actually going inside. So, okay. So by the way, I'm like totally, you know, dressed up, you know, like a young Pinay. I'm wearing like a baby tee. You remember that word, baby tee? And then I was wearing flares. Yeah. Flare jeans. Some of you tried to bring that back. It didn't stay very long. And then I was wearing Steve Madden shoes. Yeah. People are still wearing those. Okay. Anyways, so I'm like, I'm totally looking young and Pinay, and these people, I'm gonna make friends. Okay. So as I'm walking up to this group of young, probably younger than 18, like barkada, right? We didn't use the word barangay back then, but barkada. And this one Pinay turned back and she looking at me. And I said, who do you think you are, right? And she was looking at me, and then she did the whole, you know, that Pinay look. She looked down at my shoes. She looked up at my face. She looked down a couple of times, actually, and then looked up again. But then she turned to her friends and started hella laughing. Right? Hella laughing. So I'm like, what the? You know, like, what? I'm a grad student. I'm like almost 30 years old. What's going on with this? I wish I had my friend Muggs with me. She's actually in the chat right now because she would have had my back, but I was alone, right? And they didn't, you know, they were some East Bay looking Filipinos. They weren't, you know, they were gonna mess with me if I let them, right? So anyhow, so I was all like freaked out, like, you know, but freaked out, like mad, like I was like fronting. And then I thought, I'm all alone and all I got is my damn tape recorder. I need to walk away from this situation, right? So I literally, when I was writing up my research, writing up my field notes, I wrote, that didn't really count because I wasn't inside the mall, right? So I kind of pushed that off as non-data, right? So then I walk inside the mall and thinking, okay, I'm gonna get the real data because now I'm inside the mall. So I used to work at that mall. I used to work at a place called Tintiangco-Cubales. And so I went to Tintiangco-Cubales and I went inside the store and I was like, okay, well, I might as well shop since I'm here. I really miss the mall, everybody. So I went in and I started shopping, started picking up stuff, you know, and then I went into the dressing room, right? And I was like, okay, you know, might as well try on some stuff. Ain't nobody trying to talk to me right here. So then I go in and I start trying on this stuff and I was trying on these plaid flare pants. They were in, okay? Don't question that. They were in. And so the only mirrors were outside of the door. I mean, outside of the dressing room. So I had to go outside to check myself out. And y'all know how you do that. So I went outside to go look at myself and there was another Pinay. And she was trying on the same pants. And I thought, this is the connection, people. So I ran back into the dressing room, got my tape recorder, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask this Pinay, because this is like participant observation, right? This is an ethnography. And so I was so excited to ask this Pinay, like, you know, like what she thinks, but I'm going to connect with her about the pants, right? So I'm like, okay. So I go back out and I'm like, okay, look at me. I'm looking at my pants. And then I kind of like had this look on my face, like, oh, we're wearing the same pants, right? And she's like looking at me while I'm looking at her, right? And I'm just smiling hella big. You know, I got a big ass mouth, so big ass smile. And I'm like, wow, you know, like, hey, same pants. And she looked at me and she said, like literally like a guttural reaction. She said, they may look good on you, but they make me look fucking fat. And I was so uncomfortable because I thought to myself, like, who am I to like, you know, like get into this person's business? And she literally like walked back into her dressing room, and like that was the last thing she said to me. And I was like, okay, I can't fix this. How am I gonna fix this? So there was all kinds of things going on there. Issues of like me taking up her space, but also issues of body image, issues of all kinds of things that I didn't even think about, right? And so I was like, okay, you know what? Let me try. This is not gonna work. So I went across the way, and if those of you who know that mall back in the day, Tintiangco-Cubales was across from anybody? Wet Seal. Anybody know Wet Seal? Or that still exists? Wala na. It's only Forever 21 or Forever 41. Don used to call New York and Company Forever 41. Anyways, so across the way was this place called Wet Seal. So I go to Wet Seal, and the first thing I see is a Pinay who works there. And I'm like, this is perfect, because the Pinay that works there, she has to talk to me, right? Even though she bleached her hair blonde, she has to talk to me, right? And so I'm going, all right. So I go in there, and I go exactly where the Pinays were, because there were other Pinays in the store too. Where do you think they were? Okay, I'm just going to tell you. They were in the back, in the sales rack, right? They were all up in that sales, you know, looking at all kinds of stuff. And I was like, oh, I got this, you know, because I'm hella good at looking at sales. So I move my sales. I'm like, okay. And then I wait for the Pinay who works there to come up to me. And she's like standing next to me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, this is perfect, right? So I turned the record on my recorder without telling her that was not a good idea, but I did anyways. And then I said, hey. And she goes, hey, you need help? And I said, oh no, actually, you know, I'm trying to figure out this thing called Filipina feminism. And I'm wondering what you think about what it means to be Filipina. I went direct into it because I was like, gosh, I've been here in the mall for almost an hour now and got no data. So then I'm like going right for it. And like literally I am moving the sales rack, and she is fixing the sales rack as I'm messing it up, right? And we're having this interaction. And then she says to me, she says, are you going to buy something? And I said, oh my gosh, she's a capitalist. That's the first thing I went through my head. And then I said, oh my gosh, what do you mean? You know, like I was just actually asking you something. I'll buy something. And she goes, well, you know, like if you're not going to really buy something, you really should leave the store, because what you're asking me, I don't even know the answers to. Okay. So that's kind of where this story ends, because I'm like, oh my God, 3 strikes and I'm out. Like how am I going to create this thing called Filipina feminism if I don't actually have any sisterhood with Filipinas? Like I can't look at a Pinay on the street and actually smile at her and have her smile back at me. Something's up with that. And so like I sat with that, and I'm like, I can't write this article. There is no absolute way I'm going to be able to write this. And I stressed over it. And I was talking to my friend Claudine. Claudine's not on this call, but Claudine Del Rosario, she teaches at USF and she works for the mayor's office. She's this healer right now, right? She's doing amazing work. Back in the day, 1994-ish, I was like, hey, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm gonna do. You know, I don't like have any, like I couldn't find sisterhood. I couldn't find anything at the mall. And she was like, you know, Allison, I think we're just gonna have to make it up. And when she said that, it kind of clicked in my head, like, if we don't have something, and if we don't know like that it exists, we have to create it. And so with Claudine and a dozen more other Pinays, including Dawn, we created this thing called Pinayism. And from there, like writing this article was really about interviewing Pinay activists and trying to understand, like, even in activism, we were having tension with each other. Even in the art scene, we were having tension with each other. And even in academia, you know, like we were having tension with each other and dogging each other, putting each other down, like Pinays, you know, like literally Pinays, because we saw each other as competition, right? And that was like horrifying. And so I really felt like I had to build something from the ground up. And so a bunch of workshops came out of it, a bunch of presentations, and a lot of poetry came out of that development of Pinayism. It's published in a bunch of different things. I'm gonna give you a folder later, a special gift, a folder and a playlist today, everybody, that you all can take away with the articles themselves and with the music that we played and much, much more. But a lot of that became Pinayism. And so some of you might know, but I teach Filipino literature, and a lot of the Pinayism work that that has, you know, like developed over time has been, you know, housed in Philippine Lit. I'm also teaching Filipino American identity in the fall if anybody wants to come and check that out. Okay, gosh, I'm always tired after talking about the mall. Okay, everybody, that was our sort of y'all reminisce being in the mall because we ain't allowed to go there anymore. So anyhow, all right. So okay, so let's move to the next slide, Giselle, and see what we got. So I'm going to actually break down Pinayism because it has developed over the years. It was really about this thing, this equation. So if you click again, you'll see that there's this the first equation was pain plus love equals growth, because that's where I was living in my 20s and 30s. Pain plus love equals growth. I was experiencing a lot of trauma and different experiences, kind of understanding what was happening in the world. And I think sometimes we don't talk about our process of politicization as having trauma, but as I was experiencing my politicization, I was also feeling trauma and pain. And I needed to insert this notion of love so that I could grow. And this became the equation for Pinayism for hella long. Like I used to see people like send me emails, and in their little subject line, it would say pain plus love equals growth. And it really became something that I was experiencing and feeling. A few years ago, I realized that I had grown up a little bit, and that growth wasn't just the goal anymore for me. And it hadn't been for some time. And so a new equation, and Giselle can show you the new equation, it transformed, where yes, it was still about addressing the pain, addressing the love, but actually pausing, these Pinayism pauses that allows us the time to reflect. That ultimately the goal is liberation. Like we have to think of not just personal growth as the goal for Pinayism, but also community actualization, which is liberation. Like we have to be able to think of the larger and bigger picture. So Pinayism, this is the definition that it kind of sits with right now. It explores the notion of a radical Pinay sisterhood that connects the global local to the personal, stories of Pinay struggle, survival, service, sisterhood, and strength to mentally, physically, politically, and spiritually uplift ourselves. And we are the center of this. Pinayism centers the Pinay experience. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to see some, what I call the P's, I think. The P's of Pinayism praxis. So there's 4 P's, and I'm going to go through this. And again, you have all of this in your Google box Google folder that you'll be getting. And so I'll try to go a little slow, but not too slow, because you'll have access to all of this later. So the 4 P's starts off with process. So the first P in Pinayism praxis is process. Pinayism is an individual and communal process of decolonization, humanization, self-determination, liberation, and relationship building. It's also a place where we're in the middle, we're in the center, we are the ones who are telling our own stories. So Pinayism is a place where Pinay epistemologies are at the center of the discourse, dialogue, conversation, and the organizing. And it's really key to really push that word organizing when we talk about place, that it's not just about what we're thinking about, that we're doing things. The next P is production. Pinayism is critical cultural productions of art, performance, engaged scholarship, advocacy, political action, and poetry. I put that all in caps because really Pinayism is a poetic experience that expresses Pinay perspectives and counter narratives. So counter to the meta narrative of history, which is oftentimes the quote unquote white victor, but also the counter narrative to even Asian American studies and even a counter narrative to Filipino American studies, who often centered just the story of Carlos Bulosan. I love Bulosan, but he really became the meta narrative for Filipino American studies, and having to push up against that was really important to really insert the Pinay perspective. And then the last one is pedagogy. Can we go back to that slide? So last one is pedagogy. No problem, Giselle. This is Giselle's part though, the pedagogy part. Working with Giselle and a bunch of the other Pinays that I have been working with over the years, we developed this notion that Pinayism is a critical pedagogy. And it focuses on the teaching and learning of critical Pinay studies, and also mentoring and reproducing a community of Pinayists and social justice educators, artists, service providers, entrepreneurs, and advocates. And so that second one, I want to just be clear to everybody, and I like making this joke, like this dude, this is this little story time, this dude said he was talking about me behind my back. Y'all like this chisme shit. I could tell y'all your faces. So basically, this dude says, oh, you know that Allison Tintiangco? She's just a cheerleader. And I think what he really meant was I wasn't a real academic, or I wasn't really an intellectual. I was just a cheerleader. Those of you who have read my cheerleader piece, y'all know that's messed up. Because then I start to think, what do you mean I'm just a cheerleader? You don't think that Pinayism is real theory? You don't think it's like, good enough? Right? And then I started to think about that, and I was like, you know what? Actually, the word is not cheerleader. The word cheerleader is not the problem. The word just is the problem. Just a cheerleader. I am proud to be a cheerleader. And what I mean by that is I am proud, deeply, I was a cheerleader, but I am proud to be cheerleading behind a bunch of Pinays who I know are going to change this world. And if people see that as problematic, or they don't see that as enough, they can F off. Look, I even censored myself. Oh, okay. So let's move on to the next slide, Giselle, before I'm getting all warm and stuff, talking about pedagogy and how people don't understand what it means to be a quote unquote a cheerleader. So Pinayism grew way beyond me, and a lot of it, I was fortunate to be in many collaborations. And I want, this list is just because it only fits on this slide, right? There's so many. But Pinayism grew as a dynamic theory into methods and practices in a bunch of diverse spaces. And these are just, literally just, some of the ways in which people have applied Pinayism. So in history, we have Dr. Don Boholano Mabalon, Joan May Cordova, Emily Lawson. Those are like the original Pinayist folks. In community organizing, and in the arts. And so you have Irene Gillier, Cotton Candy, Glenda Makatangay. In pedagogy and education, Giselle Sacramento, Melissa Navera, Cindy Wynn, Arlene Daus-Magbual. In literature, Barbara Jane Reyes, Melissa Conlas. There's way more in literature, but I want to be mindful that, I could only fit this many people. In music and dance, of course, Ruby Ibarra, and I will cite my own daughter because she's all about Pinayism and dance. In queer communities, Janelle Borja, Celeste Francisco. And then in healing spaces, Janet Coe, who's been my diwa for a few years now, but I've known her for 30 years. JL, some of you might know her. Umipig, who's doing some amazing work with Babaylan Studies, and then Hilot by Verma Zapanta. And in my deepest and darkest moments, and when she was first starting the Hilot, she really was able to work with me to heal me and to teach me how to heal myself. And then, of course, in entrepreneurship, you may have seen it, Gina Marico Rosales and Glenda Makatangay and Pinayista. So, okay, here we go. So I'm going to pause here because I think we got to pause for queering Pinayism. This is one of the sort of newer developments. And what I mean by that, I want to also say that Pinayism has probably been queer from the get. I don't want to say that this is the first time you're hearing that Pinayism is queering, but this is the first time we're publishing something about queering Pinayism, and then also being very deliberate about using the word queer. And so I'm going to hand off a little bit, and this is a question that I had for two of my colleagues who happen to be graduate students in Asian American Studies, and I am fortunate to be chairing both of their theses right now. Theses sound like feces. I'm sorry, dude, that's weird. Okay, but I will say that these are amazing scholars, and so they are going to share a little bit. And this dialogue is really, really what we're trying to share. And I asked them the question, what do we need to consider to ensure that queer Pinay Pinexes are part of Pinayism? And then so I'm going to hand off to Janelle and Celeste to talk a little bit about that.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Allison, for introducing me. So queer Pinay Pinexism is in the works, you know, but I had, like Dr. Allison said, I had the privilege to work with her and Celeste on this article. And so when I saw Pinayism, that was like the first conceptual framework that I was like, oh my gosh, there's a conceptual framework that encompasses my experiences as a Pinay, as me growing up as a Pinay. What is this, right? Which led to me like stalking Dr. Allison a little bit, seeing where she's at, and I said, oh, SFSU, okay, let me apply to that program. But as initially I wasn't going to do queer Pinay Pinexism as my thesis. I was going to do something in higher education, but Dr. Allison really had that heart-to-heart conversation with me about like, what is it that I really want to do that's for me and not necessarily for my end goal, which used to be dean of students. We'll see what happens. But then I just realized like, I haven't really heard much about my narrative, like me being queer and Pinay, Pinex, like I don't get to see that anywhere. Why is that? And so in many ways I am taking Dr. Allison's conceptual framework and expanding it to include the narratives of queer Pinay Pinexes. I think Pinayism does a great job in tackling issues that are rooted in colonial ideals and capital ideals. And through Pinayism, they tackle a little bit about sexuality, right? But I think there's more to expand on in regards to gender and sexuality. Oh my gosh, my AirPods are dying, sorry. Yeah, so my goal for queer Pinayism is basically boundary pushing, right? In regards to like ourselves and how we understand who we are as Pinay Pinexes. Because we grew up in a world where these with predetermined systems that told us that you got to be a boy, you got to be a girl, you got to be working or not, you know, just to maintain these heteropatriarchy ideals as well. And another thing for me is through queer Pinayism is building those coalitions within our community. Often when we're talking about Filipinx American communities, we don't see the centralizing of queer narratives. It tends to be on the side, on the margins, and why is that? So in many ways, I'm trying to bridge that gap that exists for us queer Pinay Pinexes. And lastly, just having our narratives known, just like how Pinayism was rooted in the epistemology and narratives of Pinays. I strongly believe that in order for us to understand each other, our narratives need to be out in the world as well, in order to work together. Celeste, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll add some stuff. Thank you, Janelle, and thank you, Ate Allison, for allowing me to write with y'all. Queering Pinayism was really special because around this time last year, I came out as non-binary, Janelle came out as gender fluid, and this happened in Ate Allison's Pedagogy seminar. That was the first time I ever came out. And earlier when we talked about like the global, local issues that Pinayis face, we were able to really focus on this in terms of queering Pinayism and like the dangers, and call out the dangers that queer people face. And the big question was, you know, as a person that identifies as non-binary and Janelle is gender fluid, do we see ourselves as part of the sisterhood of Pinayism? And through this, we were able to break down, like, yes, we do see ourselves as part of the sisterhood, but it's more than that. And yeah, Pinayism is really about centering the narratives. So Janelle and I were able to center our queer narratives and share the stories of like the queer Filipinexes who came before us.
You're so good, Celeste. It's succinct. Janelle, Celeste, I just want to say thank you for also helping me journey through this process. You know, like I think at times when we create things, we don't always see where it's going to go, and we don't always see how it's going to change over time. And I really just appreciate the both of you. And, you know, like I do want to point to the slide though, and just like kind of naming it, because I think it's important for people to also see what is being written. So these are actual citations from the new article that will be, actually it's a chapter in Cotton Candy's up and coming book on Pinayism. And so I encourage you all to check that out. And so when I asked them that, and I'm citing Janelle here, Janelle, you want to read 1 and 2, and then Celeste number 3?
Yes. Do you want to read your question?
Oh, sige, I'll read the question. This is how we wrote it. We kept like using weird. We were really silly about the whole rewriting of this, but okay, I'll ask. Allison asks, what do we need to consider to ensure that queer Pinay-Pinexes are part of Pinayism?
What needs to be considered to ensure that queer Pinay-Pinexes are a part of Pinayism is 1, acknowledging that in our community there's a normalization of a gender binary, which feeds into a social hierarchy, while understanding how queer Pinay-Pinexes narratives disrupts the gender binary. 2, challenging the binary experiences that are salient within the Filipinx community.
It goes beyond just challenging. There's measures you have to take. You have to act on that shit. It's not enough to just be an ally. It's not enough to just understand the experiences of queer Pinays and Pinexes. You have to be an accomplice in disrupting systems that are violent, toxic, and unsafe for queer Pinays and Pinexes.
Solid. Thank you for that. And so there's a word there that I think is important to consider that has changed over time. We used to use the word ally, you know, like, oh, I'm an ally to the queer community. And what Celeste was pointing out there is this word accomplice, and thinking about what can I actually do. It's not enough to say I'm down with y'all, you know, like I actually have to do something about what is happening to the queer folk in our communities. Okay, so thank you. I appreciate you both and how you're pushing boundaries and making new worlds. Janelle and I know we have that's our dialogue around queering Pinayism. Okay, so I'm gonna hand over the mic back to Jocelle. Jocelle's gonna actually talk about some of the things that have been happening and where we are actually acting on Pinayism in general. Actually, not in general, during the pandemic, right? You're unmuted.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your stories out there, and for helping define what Pinayism and Pinayixism is. Oh, and you cannot see the screen yet. Hold up. There we go. So during this pandemic, we've been sheltering in place for the last 2 months, and Pinays have been productive, right? And not necessarily productive in a capitalist model, but productive in ensuring that we sustain ourselves and create healing spaces for all of us in community. And so I want to highlight some of the things that have been happening. Pinayista has been, providing opportunities for Pinayistas, like Pinay entrepreneurs and Pinay educators, Pinay artists, to come together in community to talk about their experiences and how they're handling their lives right now during this time. There are a couple of events that are coming up, so make sure to check them out. Their handle is @Pinayista on Instagram. And then we also have Immersion Diwa and Embodied Diwa. Janet Ko has been, is creating a space for Pinays to heal, right? Really looking at Pinays to think about their lives in this context, but also thinking about our lives holistically and how our lives are interconnected. Really bringing this idea of mind, body, and diwa or spirit in tune with ourselves, and using the current context of how place, phenomena, and I forgot the other P, but place, phenomena, and people really impact our lives and our healing, right? So I've been fortunate to be a part of this Immersion Diwa cohort these past 3 months, and look forward to future programs with Embodied Diwa. There's also been a lot of poetry writing, right? The Center for Babaylan Studies has, in the month of April, they were hosting this 30 for 30 decolonization through poetry. And for each day they had a prompt for us to write about our experiences. And so if you're following them with the hashtag decolonize30for30, there's a lot of poetry that was being put out on social media to talk about our experiences and really thinking about our lives, not only in the personal sense, but how we're interconnected and how it's related to our communal process of decolonization. We also wrote some nursery rhymes, Pinayist nursery rhymes throughout this process of Decolonize 30 for 30. That was one of the prompts to write. I think the prompt was to write to our younger selves. Is that? I don't remember, but I think that was a prompt. And so these are two of the Pinayist nursery rhymes that Ata Allison, myself, and Rachel Paras wrote. The first one, I'm a little
You're gonna sing it. No, you gotta sing it.
Right? Oh my goodness. Okay, so it goes, I'm a little Pinay, short and smart. Decolonization is my handle, and freedom is my art. When I get all pissed off, hear me shout, don't push me over or I'll kick you out, right? So it goes to I'm a little teapot. And then we have the itsy bitsy crab mentality. I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna sing this to my son later on, but it goes, the itsy bitsy crab climbed up the bucket. Another crab grabbed them. They both came tumbling down. All the other crabs tried to climb back up, but they all had colonial mentality and all fell down. So these are two of the nursery rhymes that we wrote. If you're a mother, if you have young ones, like I encourage you to share these with you. There are other ones. If you look on Instagram, you can find them there. We wrote a prayer, the Pinayism prayer. We brought together 42, was it 44, 42?
My age.
48. We brought together 48. We brought together 48 Pinays to write a Pinayism prayer, and we're currently working on an audio recording, right, of all of the prayers, or maybe a video. I think a video too. I don't know, Lauren, what are we working on? Lauren's working on this as well, and so we'll be, bringing this out to folks really soon. And then Babaylan Studies also is hosting a series of workshops on elements of care in the decolonizing world. So every day there's a new facilitator bringing in their knowledge and wisdom to share with folks, online. And so this pandemic has really been an opportunity for all of us to connect. Even though we're sheltering in place, technology has provided us the opportunity to learn from one another. And I think what's unique about this is that a lot of the experiences that we're experiencing now in terms of communicating and connecting with folks wouldn't be happening had it not been for this pandemic. So really, a lot of what's happening is a blessing in disguise, I see. And then another thing that's happening, Survival Arts, they are training Pinayis, girls and young women, folks who are non-binary, to practice in Hida Kali, which is Filipino martial arts, really centering the babaylan as a warrior and passing on this knowledge in our ways to protect the family. And so there are various groups throughout the world who are practicing, and we do have a Bay Area group here in the Lonely Land that is practicing it well, that I'm a part of. And lastly, there are a group of scholars. Cheryl Matias coined the term Mother Scholar, and so we're currently in the process of writing on Pinayist Mother Scholarship in the time of COVID-19. And so that's one of the pieces that we're currently working on, to really think about how do we mother in a time when anti-Asian discrimination is happening, in a time when many of our family members are essential workers. And so thinking about how to continue practicing Pinayism during this time. I'm gonna pass the mic back to Ate. Not myself, but Ate.
You sure you're gonna pass it to yourself? Okay. You did a good job with the singing. I was singing in my body. I was like, yes, yes. And you had a little vibrato there too. It was good. So this is a folder that is public to you all. We're not actually gonna be able to do a poetry workshop. Maybe that'll be a follow-up if y'all are interested in doing some poetry with us. But this is the actual folder with the workshop in it. And you can also access the articles there, and later on I'll give you another link for the playlist. But if you could, Giselle, if you could just kind of flash the next couple of screens. So in the folder, you get to learn how to write a Pinayism pantoum, and then if you go to the next screen. Can you go to the, oh, there we go. Okay, wait. Can we go back there? Okay, back one more. Okay, I'll just stay right here, okay? So it's okay, because everything is in that folder for you all, and we wanted to make sure we gave you some gifts. I mean, and Pinayis love to give gifts, and so this is one of the gifts, is to really go into that folder and write a Pinayism pantoum, and there's so many different ways to do that. I am gonna actually call out a couple people who've prepared pantoums for today. I'll start with Amian. I didn't say that right.
It's Amian.
Amian. So I have to do the, like, Amianan is my niece, so I have Amian. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you share your pantoum? And so a pantoum is something that has multiple lines that are repeated to add emphasis. And so we're going to hear a couple pantoums before we leave today.
Okay. So this one's about my mother. The matriarch is a model of self-sacrifice. I imagine how lonely it can be to stand on a pedestal. Next in line is the eldest daughter. My mother was everyone's ache, oldest sister. I imagine how lonely it can be to stand on a pedestal. Empty praises can't loosen the strain on her. My mother was everyone's ache, oldest sister. In her reproductive roles, giving freely is an expectation. Empty praises can't loosen the strain on her. $1 million Air Force shows to honor health workers, but no PPE. In her reproductive roles, giving freely is an expectation. Tend to wounds meant things that are broken. $1 million Air Force shows to honor healthcare workers, but no PPE. No, nursing is her life's work, after all. Tend to wounds meant things that are broken. When you give so much at work, you have less to give at home. Nursing is her life's work, after all. Give out her body and her labor for the well-being of others. When you give so much at work, you have less to give at home, especially to her eldest daughter. Give out her body and her labor for the well-being of others. Next in line is the eldest daughter, especially to her eldest daughter. The matriarch is a model of self-sacrifice.
Nice. Oh my gosh. That was really moving and so relevant for right now. And so I really appreciate that. Amiyan. Nan. I want to say Amiyan Nan. Amiyan. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to your mom too. We have a little bit of a theme of mom today. Okay, so we're going to hear another pantoum written by Lauren Daus right there. She put her glasses on so she could see her poem.
You know, these blue light glasses, online stuff got me messed up. All right, so my pantoum, I'm actually citing Irene Dulier, and then also Joselle Sacramento, and then Ata Allison. So you're gonna see a lot of Pinayism in here. We are Pinayism: global, local, personal, struggle, survival, service, sisterhood, strength, decolonization, humanization, moving toward liberation. Global, local, personal, our issues are not what make us who we are. Decolonization, humanization, moving toward liberation is what matters most in our process. Our issues are not what makes us who we are. Learning plus healing, leading to resistance plus liberation is what matters most in our process. Our legacy of resistance has ensured our survival. Learning plus healing, leading to resistance plus liberation, our existence is our resistance. Our legacy of resistance has ensured our survival. Process, place, production. Our existence is our resistance, struggle, survival, service, sisterhood, strength, process, place, production. We are Pinayism.
Thank you, Lauren. You are Pinayism. Lauren is all about
No, you are Pinayism.
Oh, I thought you were too.
We both Pinayism.
Yeah, we all.
Everyone Pinayism.
But you really are about it. Like, I know that, you know, like, I don't always get to say this, but I'll say it in public. I want to thank you, Lauren, for really being about Pinayism, especially during this pandemic. I feel really held and cared by you. You really are there for me. And I just want to say thank you. And a
thank you too.
Beautiful piece. Thank you. Okay, so let's go, like, think about all of this, and like, you all can write your own pantoums. The instructions are in the folder that I just sent you all. So if we move a little bit forward, Giselle, let's go to that list of what things that you can actually do and practice. How do you practice Pinayism? I want to be, there is a playlist. So if you want the playlist, sorry, there we go. So if you want the playlist, it has Ruby Ibarra, has Versol, has all the songs that we, shared today, and a lot more. It has her. It had, and you can also add to the list because it's a collaborative list. You can definitely check it out there. These are things that you can actually do, create Pinay playlists. So if we go to the next list, this is what we want to leave you with, like practicing Pinayism on the daily, and especially during this pandemic. So important to humanize, empathize by loving Pinays, whether you're Pinay or not. And as you heard these two beautiful poems, write a Pinayism poem and post it, and like bring us to the center of the dialogue. We need to break the algorithm on Google. Like, that is one of the frustrations, is that algorithm keeps bringing us back to the same BS, so we need to break the algorithm. Support Pinay local businesses. Both Giselle and I have Pinay earrings and Pinayista gear on right now. This is from Wounded Heart, Wounded Healing Art. That's what it is. Wounded Healing Art. She got crystals up in her jewelry. I love that. And I use all of like Malaya stuff. I am CBD happy all the time. And then I also use, we have a lot. There's a lot of stuff out there. Magpie Alchemy, you all got to use her CBD stuff and all the great stuff. So I'll put that out there. Support Pinay local businesses. I'm gonna put it also out there because I think it's important. There's a couple deadlines coming up like tomorrow. Apply to be a PEP teacher. Pinayism is central to the way we operate in PEP, you know, like, and I would encourage you all to like apply to be a PEP teacher. Pinayista, and we are wearing our gear, our Pinayista gear. Get involved, go to their website, it's pinayista.org. I heard chismis. They text me chismis sometimes. I heard they are planning a Pinay graduation on June 7th. I don't know if it's actually gonna happen, but I just wanted to put it on this slide. And it's for graduating middle school, high school, college, and graduate students. So you all should get yourselves up in that. There we go. And then apply to Pinay Rising if you are gonna be in college next year. We are literally getting donations daily. And actually, the money that is coming to pay me to do this workshop, guess where it's going? Pinay Rising, Pinay's Rising. And so I just wanted to actually say that publicly because it's really important that Skyline College knows that they're not contributing to me, they're contributing to actually 2 scholarships. So I really want to just put that out there, that Pinay's Rising is being funded by this actual workshop right now. And then the last thing I just want to put out there is there's a lot of stuff happening to Pinays in the United States and globally, and there's a lot of organizations, and I don't want to list them all out and leave somebody out and someone get butthurt. So I'm just going to say, you know, join a Pinay organization and really try to make sure that you are very much committed to addressing that list that we created at the beginning, the global, local, personal list. Our role is not to allow ourselves to be victimized and also not to victimize other Pinays. And so I'm gonna leave us with that. I'm super excited. We have one very last thing we will leave you with because we want to make sure that Ruby Ibarra knows. Oh, I think there's actually 2 slides. Okay, so there's the Pinay Rising slide. Little side note, little chismis too, is that there's this Encyclopedia of Filipino American Studies coming out. If you're interested in contributing, I'm working directly with Dr. Kevin Nadal and Dr. EJR David, and we'll be announcing our team very shortly. But if you're interested in becoming an author in that encyclopedia, we have 350 places for 350 people-ish to write, okay? So we're gonna leave you with, of course, we cannot do this workshop without, you know, paying homage to our Pinayista herself, Ruby Ibarra, and this is our anthem. And so we're gonna leave you with this beautiful, beautiful piece. I don't know if everyone's seen, I think everyone probably on this call has seen it, but it's nice to see it again. So we're gonna actually play this for everybody, and this will be our last words. It will be Ruby Ibarra's. Thank you, everybody. We're going to stick around a little bit if there's any questions or anything you all want to share. We'll be checking the Q&A for at least 10 more minutes and hanging out with the group here online. Y'all want to do isa, dalawa, tatlong bagsak? Okay, let's try that. I'll do isang bagsak. Giselle, you do dalawa. Lauren, you do tatlo, okay? Okay, ready? Isang bagsak.
Dalawang bagsak.
Tatlong bagsak.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, how y'all feeling?
That was like a dope webinar.
Oh, that was fun.
It was fun.
Sorry for
your stories.
my slide mishaps.
No,
that was smooth.
That was smooth. Giselle. I'm
gonna pass the mic to myself because I have one more slide to talk about.
I have more to say. Let's open it up just a little bit. Any thoughts from those of you who joined a little bit later? For Alvin, how was it?
It was good. I mean, y'all were very amazing, per usual, right? Joselle, you're hella funny. Just want to let you know that you're hella funny and that I would love to pass myself back to myself. So.
That's gonna be the line of the century, the Pinayism line of the century. I love it. Yeah, I'm
We have
also.
some questions.
We have
There's a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
Is there an accessible book log or resource list somewhere which identifies literature written by Pinayis in the diaspora? Or if anyone has recommendations, please feel free to share.
There is a list in the PEP book 2, but that is like already a long time ago. And so we're gonna have to redo that. I am working on my website as part of PEP. That's one of my projects. And so there will be a list there. A lot of resources have also been compiled by Barbara Reyes. And so I wanna acknowledge that, you know, she's working on that as well. So yeah, there will be a list. We'll try to make sure that everyone gets access to that. There's a couple more questions, huh? Okay.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Is there a hashtag for people who are going to be sharing their poems on social media?
That's great to ask. Let's make one up. Pinayism poetry, hashtag Pinayism poetry, or just, you can hashtag Pinayism. There's already a hashtag Pinayism that I didn't create. There's a thing here that by Nancy, I miss Nancy. She put something in the Q&A and she said, I think of Sean Ginwright's concept of radical healing, working on self, then interpersonal, then system changes. What language and narrative I am living in to perpetuate the problems. Changing my language regarding the Pinay issues involves understanding our collective experience. I think that's super real. Thank you, Nancy, for bringing Sean into the space. He's one of my former co-teachers we used to teach a class together. And I definitely think that, yes, it is about radical healing. In his book, Radical Healing, he also talks about radical placemaking, which actually means, you know, like this idea of a post-imperial life that doesn't have to live within the structures that we are forced to comply to. So a lot of good stuff there. Any of you in here have any more questions or thoughts? Muggs, what are you thinking? I miss you, girl. I haven't seen you in so long. This is one of my I didn't say oldest. I meant,
all good, girl. We all came up at the same time.
Okay, all right. One of my oldest friends, even though she's still younger than me. Christine Capacillo, we used to call her Muggs for all kinds of reasons. She's a Balboa alum from way, way, way back.
Way back. No, this was what I needed. I just haven't been in a space like this in a really long time. We're doing our best to shelter in place, but my family's, you know, in Daly City. My sister comes and drops off stuff once a week, but it's just not the same. And so just like seeing a bunch of Pinays on the screen, it makes me feel like I'm home. And so like being in a pandemic, I don't really feel like I'm at home, you know? So this was great. So thank you so much.
Christine or Muggs, meet Jasil. I know you've heard her speak today, but she's moving to Hayward, right down the street from you.
Oh, okay. Are you here already, or you're planning? It's in the works.
Within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. So we'll definitely like keep in touch. I mean, we can, you know, I mean, social distance wise, we could probably like meet up and walk 6 feet apart. Take a walk in the neighborhood, but I'm not sure what part of Hayward. I'm new to the East Bay. I'm a Frisco girl, born and raised, and lived in New York for 13 years, and I just moved here last year. So I'm fairly new to the area as well.
Y'all have a lot in common. Yeah, and Giselle just took a position over at Cal State East Bay.
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, I look forward to connecting.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Muggs.
Yes, thank you, guys. Appreciate you all.
There was a question in the Q&A. Francis asked, how can Pinoys support Pinays?
I don't know, Alvin. How can Pinoys support Pinays?
Personally, you're talking about me personally?
I'm talking about you as a Pinoy.
Yes. I think I practice that every day with my significant other here, Monica. Where are you at? Yeah, it's clear your face is not on here.
Do you have some concrete examples of that support? I would like to know.
He be copying your hair. That's what your hair, your glasses.
I'm excited for your hair care routine.
Heard about that.
Excuse me. Okay, I'm trying to like honor my boo here, but if y'all just want to talk,
Oh, okay, sorry.
yeah.
Your turn.
Okay. I think for me it's just like being able to give her space to for anything. I know that I am somebody who just has like a big, I guess, big personality, big voice, right? I'm very like hard-headed and stubborn, but like whenever she speaks, I give her the time and space that she needs to say whatever she would want to say. Everything that I do is in support of her. You know, I feel like being in this space, especially like learning from y'all, right? Like I always try to advocate what can I do in my positions of power to give more opportunity and voice to Pinayis. I always try to also teach my Pinoy brothers how to be supportive and to give that perspective, right? I also like share resources with them on how to become better folks and become better accomplices in the work that we do, because I do honor that we can't change this world separately. So I just try to align myself and try to just ask what she would need and to support as best as I can with the resources and positions of power that I am a part of. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Oh, I love you, man. I love that. Any more thoughts?
We have that slide on this presentation, but there's a slide where where we say that Pinayism is not male bashing, and so I just want to reiterate that, like, Pinayism is for everyone. Like, you don't have to be Pinay to be a Pinayista or Pinayista. They're like, so for those who don't identify as Pinay or Pinayx, you can also practice Pinayism by thinking about how to center the experiences of Pinayis in your life.
I think it's also kind of like, when these things happen, when you do Google searches, because when I try to do the Pinayism thing with my students, but it doesn't come off as, it doesn't have the same feel if it doesn't come from Pinay. But like doing the Google searches and having our own like Pinoy brothers just to understand what our sisters go through, like they don't understand that, right? I think being a Filipino man, there's a lot of things to unpack, and one of those things that we have to unpack is understanding our place alongside our sisters, and I think that's like the hardest part of it, because I feel like like toxic patriarchy hella runs strong, especially like how we were raised. We were raised to be a certain way, and it's reinforced when we were growing up, especially when you have a lot of like toxic folks like that, So I think it's just being able to be comfortable sitting or standing or being with your sisters and just being able to listen and not take anything personally, because it's not an attack on you. It's more of like, it's more of an analysis and sharing where they're coming from, and their feelings is nothing personal. So being able to take a step back and being able to just be in that space, and although it's very uncomfortable sometimes, that like our sisters go through so much more than we do, and I think just being uncomfortable and just sitting there and just to let them know that we are there just with them, just to ride with them is enough. Like sometimes the easiest thing I do when Monica's talking is just shut up and listen. And you know what? That has been working hella well. Just saying. I'm gonna just add that, right? Pro tip.
You're solid. Alvin, I think maybe there should be a forum for Pinoys who want to practice Pinayism. Want to, they should. And so maybe that's something to consider and bring together.
Mm-hmm.
And not just Pinoys, but just anyone who loves Pinayis, Like anyone who loves Pinay should be all up knowing what Pinayism is about. Very important. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I'm gonna close this out. I do want to mention to all of you, I know there's still some participants in the other room, that there is another call that's happening at one that starts at 4 o'clock that's on ethnic studies. I really should have plugged that a little more. And then later on after that, Jasil Sacramento is doing some breakout room discussions on ethnic studies. And that I think starts, I want to say 5:30. Is that right, Giselle? Yeah, so all you have to do is register. It's coming out of Cal State Fresno, and just FYI, for those of you who are down for ethnic studies, you know, like we really are in an important place right now. The pandemic has put into discussion that this person, her name is Betty DeVos, she is the head of education in our nation, is actually putting into question like what is essential in education, since we cannot have things like PE and art online, so why should we have them? She's actually thinking about cutting those things. And then I believe that ethnic studies is also going to be on that block of cutting. So that's really nerve-wracking. So I would encourage you all to participate, making sure that we are always in the mode of saving ethnic studies. Even if we have it in our schools, some of us, we should really be in the mode of always fighting for ethnic studies. So join Giselle. There's, again, the webinar is at 4 o'clock, but then Giselle is facilitating at 5:30. So we should probably give her a break to eat. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for
love
participating.
you all. I loved having everybody in this room. It was great. And I'm so excited to see what the comments are. Okay,
Awesome.
so we'll see you all soon. Bye. Thank you, Alvin.